Good morning, good afternoon, good day to everyone, depending on where you're joining us from, and welcome to our latest edition of our Lightning interview series. So as always, we want to make these sessions interesting and interactive, so please do introduce yourself, tell us where you're joining from, what you do, anything else of interest to ourselves or to our fellow attendees. And before we get started with today's Lightning interview with Daniel Voigt Godoy, who's a data scientist and author of the multi-book series, Deep Learning with PyTorch Step-by-Step. By the way, he'll also be talking about ODSC Europe. I want to touch upon what's next in our series. So on May 17, we'll have a free webinar on feature stores. Feature stores are getting a lot of traction in the last couple of years. So that might be a good free webinar to check out. That's going to be quickly followed on May 19th for a build NLP models with Azure AutoML. Microsoft is giving that. And then our ODSC mini boot camp for Europe is coming up quite fast. That is a 3-day event, by the way. There'll be 1 day virtual for introductory level courses. If you want to cover math, you want to cover SQL, Python, all that good stuff, followed by 2 days of the conference itself. And that will both be, the first day is virtual, but then the second day will be either in person or virtual, whichever you prefer. And then, of course, want to talk a little bit about ODSC Europe, which I will in the next slide. But one question we always get, is this session recorded? It absolutely will be. And by the way, if you go on to our AI Plus platform, you'll be able to catch some very interesting pre-recorded sessions from previous guests. Now, for ODSC Europe, we do a free pass there as well. It's our demo talk pass, and we're currently building out that agenda. It's looking pretty exciting. We have we're going to have topics on MLOps, machine learning and deep learning, of course, definitely NLP, and one I'm pretty excited about, which is machine learning for finance, and a late addition is vector search. So if you've been doing any vectorization, just beginning that, semantic search, any of those topics are looking to do something more advanced in vectorization, such as Q&A, then check out that focus area in Europe, and the demo talks there. Those will be coming quite soon to our schedule. But the schedule has been launched. I think we're just announcing that tomorrow. Pretty much 80% full. We're just waiting for a few laggard speakers to give us their talks and abstracts. And by the way, we do have a pretty deep discount for members of our community. So if you want to grab that code on there, not sure what the team was thinking when they wrote down that code. It is quite long, but we have no doubt of who that code is for. So a pretty good discount there, and super excited. It's first time back in Europe in 3 years. We will be at the London Tobacco Docks. If you've never been there in East London, it's an incredible venue, and very excited. For the first time, we are part of London Tech Week. So it doesn't matter if you're into data science, AI, blockchain, databases, programming. That's going to be quite a major event, London Tech Week. So lots of networking, lots of stuff going on there. And I know we get a lot of people on this on these programs that are looking for their next job or their first job in data science. So go look for it's called AI Plus PLUS. .careers, scan that QR code, and we've a bunch of jobs there still from our career fair we hosted at East a couple of weeks ago rather, and we have jobs in both Europe, the US, and other places as well. And that's a free service we offer to our community. And then if you have a job, by the way, you can use that as well. It's free. And AI Plus training, as I mentioned, that's our on-demand and live virtual platform. You can go there. There's hundreds of free videos on there. We also have some subscriber plans as well. And for that, you can get a free 7-day trial or just try the free stuff, including those interviews on there. So with all that stuff complete, as mentioned, today's interview is with Daniel Godoy, who is a very accomplished data scientist and author of the very impressive multi-book series, Deep Learning with PyTorch Step-by-Step. Now, Daniel, in addition to being a practicing data scientist, he also writes quite frequently for Towards Data Science. In the past, he has contributed to numerous Python packages. And Daniel, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me here. Thanks for the nice introduction too.
Yeah, great to have you back. I know you were a speaker. Speaking of ODSC Europe 2019, we had you that in 2019, and super excited to have you back on June 15th and 16th at our next edition. But not to get too far ahead of myself, Daniel, would love to start the show as we always do. Tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and your journey to becoming a data scientist, if you will.
Sure. Well, I'm Brazilian, currently living in Berlin. And I've been a developer since forever, and I work as a developer in Brazil for 10 years. Then I worked for the government for 6 years, and I started doing data analysis in this role. And that got me interested in data science. I did this mandatory course from Andrew Ng in Coursera, right, in 2014 still. And then in 2015, I had the opportunity to come to Berlin to attend the Data Science Retreat, which is a bootcamp, 3-month bootcamp. I learned a lot there, and then I got a job here in Berlin. And after a while, I started teaching there as well in the following year, 2016. So that's how I started.
That's awesome. And I know your sessions at ODSC were very highly rated. That's why you were invited back, by the way. That's our little secret. So awesome. I can tell you firsthand, Daniel is an awesome instructor. And you mentioned Berlin there, and we keep a very close eye on the open source community, what's going on there. And I know a ton of people through ODSC from Berlin in particular. I'm Irish myself originally, have lived in London, but mostly in Boston now. But there's a lot going on in Berlin. It seems to have some kind of attraction there in the AI space. Yeah, what's the story with Berlin and AI these days, Daniel? Now you're coming out of lockdown.
Yeah, it has been hot for several years already. So when I came here in 2015, it was already picking up pace. One of the reasons is the boot camps, right? Back then there was only Data Science Retreat, the boot camp that I attended. Now there are others, like there's IronHack, there's Spice Academy. There are many places where you can learn data science. The startup ecosystem is very rich, right? You have many startups and some companies that are like huge, like Zalando, that were startups back then, and now they are like huge players in the market. So there are plenty of opportunities for people trying to get into this field here, right? I think that's
why. Absolutely, yeah, can vouch for that. And not to discount any of the places, like folks joining us here from Dublin and other cities, and not to knock London, of course, but if you are thinking of if you're working for one of these awesome companies that allow you to work from anywhere, I would highly recommend Berlin. I've been there in the summer. Great beer gardens, a great tech scene, pretty vibrant meetup scene there as well. At least there was, and I'm sure that'll get back on track. And then for a lot of our Ukrainian friends, I know a lot of our staff is based in Ukraine, and know a lot of people there, and some of them have decided to some data engineers and developers and whatnot. I know they've relocated to Berlin. Pretty happy with it. Yeah. So anyone got any questions about the Berlin scene? Please hit Daniel up later. So let's move on to the topic at hand, which we're all very here to hear about. So PyTorch Step-by-Step. So want to get into the book, want to get into PyTorch, but give us what was the inspiration behind the book? What was your motivation? Who's the audience? All that good stuff.
Yeah, so I've been teaching at Data Science Retreat for several years. I paused this when the pandemic started, and that's when I had the opportunity to actually write the book. But actually, the idea from the book came a little bit earlier. 1 year earlier, in 2019, I was attending a summer school in Norway, and it was they were using PyTorch. And back then, I was a Keras user, so I used to use Keras and TensorFlow. And I'm going to learn a little bit of PyTorch myself to attend this summer school. And then I end up writing a blog post on Towards Data Science. And this blog post really gave me a whole different feedback. So I got like 300,000 views on that until now, which is a lot. And back then, I was approached by one traditional publisher asking me if I wanted to author a book on PyTorch 1.x. And I didn't end up taking their deal, but I really got with the idea of the book in my mind. And then I said, okay, I'm going to combine my experience as a teacher with a different way of writing a book. Because I think that many books, they always follow the same formula, no one challenges the way the topics are introduced to the student. They're very formal, lots of notation, which may be okay for someone that's used to like in academia, right? But I'm not an academic myself, so sometimes I'm okay saying that I struggled sometimes to read a paper, and I wanted to make it simple. So imagine what would feel like if I were teaching this to the students at the bootcamp, and then at some point, okay, I explained something, they would like to raise a question, raise a hand and say, okay, what do you mean by that? Well, why is that? Or this feels weird. Why are you saying this? So I try to mimic the students' behavior into the book. So if you see the book, you see there are many, many questions that I pose as if I were the reader. And I try. I hope that I can read what the trying to guess what the reader is thinking at the moment, right?
Yeah, and I love the structure of the book, and I love the way you layer this. And we'll talk more about how you structured it with GitHub and all that stuff, because I view that book more of a course than an actual book. By the way, for our LinkedIn audience, if you guys, I would encourage people to connect with each other on LinkedIn as you're kind of introducing yourself here, because you reach out to people on LinkedIn, they're always looking at why you're reaching out to me on LinkedIn. So now this is a good excuse. So yeah, Daniel, so talking about PyTorch itself, so PyTorch, has an interesting background because TensorFlow, scikit-learn for the longest time was the machine learning framework, but it wasn't really a deep learning framework. TensorFlow exploded in the scene. What was that, 2017? I forget my years now. And then Keras gave it a lot of legs as well. So you had a Python interface, and whether you like it or not, Python's kind of like the de facto language for a lot of machine learning, deep learning. But and then I think PyTorch was a lot of academics using it, and now it's become much more popular. So why PyTorch? Like, what's the draw for PyTorch? Why are you writing books about it, doing courses on it? Yeah. So what's the magic there?
So yeah, I mean, of course, I'm biased, right? Because I really like PyTorch. I kind of made the transition from Keras to PyTorch. I like this tweet from Andrej Karpathy that we were mentioning before. That he says, "Yeah, I'm using PyTorch every day. My skin feels clear. My eyesight is better. So because it's very enjoyable. It's funny. I really like people to try it out to see, because with TensorFlow, especially back then, with like a version 1 point something, I felt very convoluted to work with it. Of course, when TensorFlow 2.0 came, it is changed. So the frameworks are not so different anymore, right? You can work. Right. Yeah. It's a matter of taste at this point. And PyTorch was initially much preferred by the academia because it was easier to customize and to try different techniques using the code, because basically you're just writing Python code that turns out is building a deep learning model altogether, right? You don't have, I don't know, it just feels more natural. But back then it was harder to deploy in PyTorch. But at this point, both frameworks, TensorFlow and PyTorch, are mature enough that it's a matter of choice which one you want to use, right? The other one that you mentioned, JAX, is a new kid on the block sort of thing, right? Like PyTorch was maybe 4 years ago. There is a lot of buzz around it, so people really enjoy it. I don't have experience with that, so I cannot have a grounded opinion on it. But anyway, it's still too young to compete with the other two.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting, and you see a lot of movement that now, but PyTorch definitely seems to be the most popular one at the moment. Other ones are up and coming. And then you also see some other shift as well, because I'm sure some of our audience are just beginning their journey into deep learning, machine learning. Others are maybe experienced practitioners. Maybe they're using PyTorch already. Others are using TensorFlow. But you see definitely a shift. I don't think it's a zero-sum game because, as you were saying, Daniel, you learned something about tensors in TensorFlow. our autograds that kind of can translate over to PyTorch. And now you see with Onyx, the Onyx standard, where you can port your models from TensorFlow to PyTorch and other frameworks. That's been around a while. It's getting some traction. Daniel and I were just discussing previous. There's another group, startup project based in Berlin called Ivy. It's on GitHub. They wrote a pretty interesting paper that got my attention. And what they're trying to do is build a wrapper around TensorFlow, PyTorch, JAX, and all these stuff. And not quite sure where that is yet, but that's a pretty interesting project. So it's not a zero-sum game. So learning one of these will actually help you work with JAX and stuff like that. So when you go to JAX, by learning PyTorch, you don't have to relearn all the fundamentals. And that's what's great, what I love about your book. Like you cover the fundamentals. So it's not so much, how to be a PyTorch per se. Like the book is very focused on various evergreen topics, as I like to call them. But there's also just talking about PyTorch. There's a bit of a misconception that PyTorch is for researchers A and for deep learning engineers B, like computer vision. But yeah, talk about some of the other uses of PyTorch outside of and certainly talk about computer vision, but for again some of our listeners here.
Sure. Yeah. So one thing that you pointed out that I was asked about is this a PyTorch book that you happen to know deep learning, or is it a deep learning book that happens to use PyTorch? And this is the case, right? It's a deep learning book where you learn all the concepts that you can use in whatever framework you want to use later. But I like PyTorch, so I use PyTorch to demonstrate this concept. And regarding what you said, right? PyTorch was most popular with researchers back then, but now it's matured. So you have the ability to more easily deploy models if you want. You can quantize them to make them smaller. Now there is also PyTorch Mobile that you can more easily deploy a deep learning model into the, like edge computing, right? So it will be running on your phone. So at this point in time, there is no difference anymore when it comes to deployment. Of course, what will happen is that many companies will be using, maybe they are already using TensorFlow. So if you go to one of these companies, they're not gonna change the code base because there's a huge cost, right? So basically, it's either a choice that you made and then you have to live with it, or if you have the chance to start anew, you can choose. But there are like no hard differences between the two of them. And like I said, it's more of a matter of taste.
Yeah, exactly. And then one of the hottest areas of ML and data science right now is NLP, and the hottest area of NLP is, of course, deep learning. Yeah, so just to talk about some of the stuff you cover in the book, because again, within your book, it's very intuitive the way you laid it out. You have a whole GitHub repository tied to it. You got volume 1, 2, and 3, and we know this is pretty much a commitment for time. So I love the way you split it up into 3 different volumes. And volume 1 covers the fundamentals. So, gradient descent, differentiation, good stuff like that. But you also cover transfer learning and some topics like that. And by the way, for our audience, please pose any questions, because if these questions are too basic, if you have any other questions you want to ask, please share your questions on the chat there. But yeah, so transfer learning's got a lot of traction recently. Talk us through a little bit about that, about what you cover in your book and all that good stuff, if you don't mind, Daniel.
Yeah, sure. Like I was telling you before, I had to split the book into 3 volumes because the original book, the digital version, ended up having 1,100 pages. And turns out you cannot print that on Amazon Print on Demand, right? So I decided to split it already as a logical split between fundamentals, computer vision, and natural language processing and sequences. So I made 3 volumes out of it. Then the transfer learning part is covered mostly in the 2nd volume, which is about computer vision. So you can use like pre-trained models in computer vision to just fine-tune them to whatever is the application that you're trying to model, or the model you want to achieve. Like this one example. You can use, for instance, like a ResNet or an Inception model. They are very efficient and traditional. Now they are already traditional architectures for computer vision. For instance, you could use build an application to detect if it's a happy cat or an unhappy cat. Actually, this is a real use case that I saw someone tweeting about it a while ago. Unfortunately, I don't remember who it was, but I really like this app, and I think that's a really good example. You can use a pre-trained model, and then you have to feed happy and unhappy cat faces. What I still don't know is what an unhappy cat looks like, right? But turns out that this person did this model, and what she managed to accomplish was that the unhappy cats are actually sick cats. So if you take a picture of the cat and the model would classify it as unhappy, it turns out that the cat may be actually sick, like dehydrated or having some other issues. And people started classifying that and taking the cat to the vet, and they were like early detecting diseases with this app, which is amazing. It's super easy, assuming that you have the data or happy and unhappy cats, right? It boils down to the data set. If you have the data set, getting a model like this deployed in your phone would be relatively simple. So that's the magic of transfer learning, right? You can like leverage the computational power that big players use to train these models to do whatever you want.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And then, so within the book yourself, you've got a very comprehensive GitHub repository. So that to me, it has the code, it has all the data. So it's super easy with the book to kind of get up and running with PyTorch.
And they just try to make it reproducible, right? Because we have this problem that if you cannot reproduce, you don't get a confidence on what you're doing. Especially as a reader, as a beginner, you need to know that whatever you're doing is correct, so you can match what's being
perfect. Yeah, and Ira will post a link to the book, by the way, in just a minute. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what else do you cover for Volume 2, computer vision? What are some of your favorite methods, deep learning methods that's covered in the book?
That's hard. Favorite is hard to pick. I mean, like I said, I like the transfer learning part, which is really helpful, right? For the computer vision, I think that the example was a good illustration. And when it comes to natural language process, which is mostly covered in the third volume, I used these Alice in Wonderland and the Wizard of Oz as examples. First, because they are nice, right? And second, because they're copyright free, right? They're public domain, so I can easily use this classic texts in my book. And the idea was to generate a model that would classify if a given sentence comes from one or the other. And then you can do type whatever, right? And then see if it is able to do this classification. For that, I used the BERT model, right? Because this is like one of now traditional models for this sort of prediction. When you want to make predictions or classification models using natural language processing, you get these embeddings, which are numerical representations of the words, and then you use them to train a model. And then at the very end of the book, like the cherry on top was using GPT-2, which is manageable given the size of these models, right? They are getting out of hand in terms of size, but the GPT-2 is still possible to run relatively well in a regular computer or in Google Colab. And then I use that to try to generate a paragraph of text as if it were from Alice in the Wonderland, which is a generative model, right? Which is a fun thing to do. So I think that this is the most fun part to see what the model can come up with its own. And then if you read the piece of text, it makes sense, but at some point it may also get inconsistency because it treats the rabbit as a she, and then in the middle way it treats the rabbit as he. So I mean, this kind of thing happens, right? But,
yeah, just seeing if we have any questions here. Again, just post your questions for Daniel when you have a moment. Yeah, so you already touched upon it. So you cover transformer models pretty well in your book, I believe. It's still on my to-do list to go and look through Volume 3. And then you mentioned BERT and GPT-2. So is GPT-3 available for wide use, or is that only available by request, I think?
I honestly don't know at which point it is. I know the other day I requested access to this DALI, the latest thing. So it's hard to keep track of what's open already or not. Yeah, but I mean, I don't think you can run GPT-3 on a regular computer of your own or something like that. Would be, I think, probably because GPT-2 is already gives you some load on if you have like a regular GPU. Mine is like 4 years old, so not state of the art, but
yeah. So tell us a little bit about that, because I want to get into some use cases that big companies are using PyTorch for. But just for our audience who's getting started in PyTorch, they'll mostly be running this on small demos. So tell us a bit about, walk us through, because I know you cover in your book, but how to get started with PyTorch.
So I try to make everything as simple and possible to run in a regular computer, right? Or at least in Google Colab, because then you have a GPU. If you don't have a GPU on your own laptop, then or your desktop computer, you can use Google Colab. So I try to keep all the examples with the that are not too intensive and computationally speaking. And then at the very beginning, I cover, how you install everything, right? Because installation is relatively hard, especially if you're using a GPU. I try to give some pointers on how to install the CUDA drivers and all these kind of things. So setting up can be already a bit challenging. I try to cover this as much as possible. If you don't want to bother that, I offer the alternative to go to Google Colab. So that's why all the notebooks are free and available on GitHub, so you can basically run everything from top to bottom. You're going to have everything that's in the book, including the images. The only thing you don't get is the text, right? But all the images are there.
Yeah.
Ideally, if you want to start it, if you go with the first book will walk you through all the basic steps that you need to do to train a model in PyTorch. So even if it's a really simple model, and I start with the linear regression to make it as basic as possible, but then once you master the basic steps, you're going to apply this over and over and over again. Even if you use some really fancy, or maybe not that fancy anymore, transfer learning with a pre-trained model is still going to be the same.
Perfect. And I want to get into a little bit about the job market and PyTorch for people looking for jobs, and how does one get experience in that. But just by way of a motivation, so you mentioned Andrew Capaci, who's head of AI at Tesla, by the way. He's a big fan of PyTorch. You also mentioned other companies in your book, Uber, OpenAI, Meta, of course. By the way, PyTorch came out of Facebook, now Meta, and I was just talking to someone on their team a couple of days ago, and they've got some pretty exciting new developments coming out over the next weeks and months, so keep an eye on that. But if I was going to go work at, I know every use case at every company is different. So we talked about small scale PyTorch for embeddings. Obviously, none of us have the resources of OpenAI or Facebook, Meta, or Uber. But give us an idea of what you think some of the companies are using PyTorch for, within the context of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the most hot topics lately is basically NLP models, right? Because then you can have all sorts of things. These latest developments with the commoditization of models like BERT or GPT allow people to create text using generative models, or there's a better understanding of the natural language, so you can improve chatbots. I saw many companies trying to do stuff with that, like chatbots, and trying to understand what the user actually is requesting. So I think that these trying to improve the interface between a user and the application, use NLP, I think this is one of the hottest topics these days. And I think this is a particularly interesting application of PyTorch or deep learning models in general.
Yeah, no, exactly. And definitely NLP, and because again, definitely perhaps the perception was a couple of years ago with deep learning, it was mostly companies using for computer vision and on vision and video. But I definitely see a lot of traction with NLP. Also, recommendation systems seem to be pretty hot as well, but sometimes the recommendation systems are part of the NLP workflow. And yeah, so because getting on to my next question there, we always have quite a few people who are just starting their data science machine learning journey on this show. And the question always comes up, which language should I start with? Should it be Python or R or Julia? Let's not get into that today. Maybe we are a little biased towards Python. And the next question is, there's so many frameworks out there. Which one should I learn? And again, not to pick anyone over the other, but definitely, my advice is forget about my own biases, which go with the ones that company tend to hire for most, and definitely the ones at the moment are both TensorFlow and PyTorch for sure. Haven't seen much in JAX. Scikit-learn is kind of perennial, but it's not kind of the same stuff. So the next question is, well, if how do I get a job doing PyTorch if I have no experience in a company doing PyTorch? And I think that's fairly straightforward. Don't go into a job pretending that you're a Python guru and you've done it at scale. I think you'll get a lot of traction if you tell someone, how'd you learn PyTorch? Well, I did a boot camp, or I did this, or I read Daniel's book. There was 3 volumes of it. It was over 1,000 pages and hundreds of examples. I think that will get you quite far because, like I said, a lot of these skills are transferable. And even if you go into a company that they're using TensorFlow, if you pick one, for example, PyTorch, I think they're quite transferable. So, yeah. So I know as an instructor, but do you have any opinion as PyTorch as a learning tool, as a tool for your advancing your career?
Yeah, so like I said, I think that of course I'm biased, right? Because I wrote this series of books, but I think that PyTorch is easier to learn, at least when compared to TensorFlow. The other day I was checking some. You're always learning, right? So I was checking a little bit more on generative models, and then I went going to some Keras code, and then of course I understand what's there, but if for me at least, maybe I'm too used to PyTorch already, so it doesn't feel so. The flow is not right for me. So I think that when I see something, oh yeah, okay, it makes more sense. It feels like more natural. But again, this is my perception, right? So there is no right answer to that. Either you go to a company that they use this or that framework, and you're not likely not to change what they are using, right? Unless you're starting from a data science team from scratch. Or, but if you want to learn, of course, I recommend my own book. And like you said, it's transferable, right? I try to explain the mechanism behind all the techniques, like dropout, batch norm, layer norm, whatever, everything, all the basic building blocks of the modern architectures. Well, not all, right? Because you cannot cover everything, but as many as I could in 1,000 pages, I try to cover. So because if you have this understanding, if you know how these building blocks work, then you're going to see that eventually when you get a new model, most of the stuff is the same, but someone added a new layer or a tiny change to the model. So it's going to make it easier for you to go to the next step. So that's what I was trying to accomplish with the book. So I can tell you that you're not going to make production ready code with this book. This is not the purpose of this book. The purpose of this series of books is to understand the concepts so you can build upon them, and then you're going to go for something more like production ready.
Yeah, and I do love one thing you definitely did in your book, and I know this for a fact because having done data science, machine learning, data engineering myself for years. And then secondly, getting feedback from attendees of ODSC speakers, for example. What's key is teaching the audience, in this case, your reader audience, the common errors and pitfalls within a given topic, right? And I feel a lot of books don't do that well because many of us are copy and paste coders. We don't look for a schema or an architecture. We look for a solution for a problem, and books traditionally are not good for that. So, yeah, so this is kind of like one of my last wrap-up questions here. Tell us a bit about the common pitfalls of working with PyTorch and what you cover in your book in regards to that, if you will.
So there are many small details, right? I actually learned myself a lot while writing the book, right? Because even if you have an understanding, an idea of how things work, when you go to implement and you try to really get what's happening behind something, you start to see some small details. So, like for instance, reproducibility of the code is difficult to some extent. For simple models, it's fine, but if you go deeper and deeper, this gets you have to put more and more seeds. So I said I wish there was like a Lord of the Rings, one seed to rule them all, right? Something like that. There is none. You have to really set many different places. And there are some quirks with the library that they are being weeding out as new versions go. For instance, Torch Vision 0.8 or before, you had to set the random seed for the Python random module. Otherwise, you will not get reproducibility. I mean, I did not know that, right, before writing the book. I found this trying to come up with that. So everything that I found that, okay, this may trip the reader over. If they don't know that, I try to highlight it. Make like a warning. Yes, see, please check this out, because if you don't know this is happening behind the scenes, you're gonna may run into trouble and you will fail to understand what's happening. So there are many. I don't remember anything like a huge red flag or anything that really out of the ordinary. But there's so many small things that they have to take into account.
Yeah, those are what I call productivity knowledge, because you can spend hours, sometimes days, finding a workaround, finding the right thread. So that's why I love that you cover those in your book as well. And sorry, really quick last question. I think one of our members in the audience asked, since you're Brazilian, are you going to avail of some translation models and translate this to Portuguese?
Actually, I thought of that, but it's funny because at this point, especially since I read the consume content in English, it's more natural to write about this in English than in Portuguese, and now I'll struggle to
I can imagine that be an interesting Google Translate or other these translations problems, but I think that we've done this before for our websites and stuff like that, and the problem always is the images, right? I know there's image to text to image, but just the image component of that would be quite an interesting project and problem. Maybe it's time you get yourself an intern, Daniel, for your next project. So whoever met that, if maybe they want to intern, would you get some experience? But Daniel, again, such a pleasure having you on this show. Really, really looking forward to having you at ODSC Europe. Can't wait to hear your workshop there. So again, anyone interested in PyTorch, getting a deep dive into it, please take a look at Daniel's book. We shared a link there, or catch him at ODSC Europe. And then, Daniel, if people want to get a hold of you, they want to buy your book, what's the best way to do that?
So besides the link that's in the video, that's the Limpub, the digital version that covers everything. You can also get the printed version if you want. And see, this is huge, the 3 volumes. They are available on Amazon. Yeah, you can buy them on print on demand on Amazon. Unfortunately, not every country has this possibility, so you can buy like in Europe, in the US, Canada, Australia, Japan, I think. Unfortunately, India and Brazil, they don't have the print on demand, but you can still get the Kindle version, because these 3 volumes are also available in Kindle on Amazon if you want. And if you want to check more things about the book, you can go to PyTorch Step-by-Step.com. I have the links for all the versions there. I have the links for the notebooks, some reviews already. I'm working on the idea on making these into a video course. So I'll
definitely let us know about that.
I will likely post that, like a preview or something like that, to get feedback from people. So you go to PyTorchStep-by-Step.com, you're going to see the whole picture.
Fantastic, Daniel. Well, thank you so much. We'll be chatting in about 4 short weeks. Sure. Europe, and thanks for being on the show. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us once again. Do check odsc.com Europe when you have a moment. Do log on to AI Plus. Again, this session will be recorded. We'll put it on AIPLUS.training. It goes on in about a week, and Daniel will give you a copy as well. And we'll see you at the next session next week. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.